One of the phrases that is synonymous with you is the world's most disciplined man. And when I was doing my research for the show, I found out that you actually almost accidentally got christened that after a throwaway comment by one of your clients. That really surprised me.
Yeah, totally. Listen, I'm not David Goggins. I'm not Special Forces. SAS, I think, is what the Special Forces are over there in the UK. Like, I'm not any of those things. But what I am is a very productive person. And so years ago, one of my coaching clients said, you're the most productive person I know. And then that kind of morphed into a whole bunch of conversations among people. And somebody said, oh, you're the world's most disciplined man, which, again, depending on how you define it, I'm probably not. But what I am is I know what I want in life and I stay focused to it. And for me, producing a lot of content is one of those things that moves the needle in my life, moves the needle in my business. And so therefore, that's the optics that give, that people see. Now, on the flip side, by nature, I'm like most people. I want to take the path of least resistance in life. I want to wake up and eat some chocolate cake and, watch some football on TV. And, that's the sort of thing. But I knew that I wanted more out of life. And so I built systems, which are the secret to success that anybody can use. And we call them effortless discipline systems that allow people to get rid of bad habits and add good habits.
When you get christened with a nickname like that or a mantra like that, there's an encouragement to live up to it as well. And I know that in your latest book, that's something that you were exploring in terms of almost that, I don't want to say pressure, but that weight of expectation that you were the most disciplined man in the world was on your shoulders, so to speak.
Yes and no. I would say that it certainly it does give you the expectations, and I think that's very valuable. That when people look to you, and if I was to say no, I'm not, and was really hardcore against it, then that would relieve some of the pressure. But I wasn't, and therefore that did help me live according to structure and routine and stuff like that. It wasn't something that got me super excited. Like it wasn't something that I took a lot of did some bragging about or anything or took pride in or anything. I was just like, yeah, okay, sure, I get it. But let's get on to something more important. Now, on the flip side, I think that it did allow me and gave me a crutch for supporting some of my undisciplined behaviors. So socially anxious, introverted tendencies. Therefore, I'm the world's most disciplined man. Inside, I'm socially anxious and introverted. Therefore, if you invite me out to even a pub for a game night or whatever, right? Like what normal people do, which you shouldn't avoid all the time. I avoid it all the time because I'm the world's most disciplined man who has to go to bed at a certain time, who has to do, 19 things tomorrow. And therefore that fed the socially anxious, introverted side of me. So it was actually, there was a dark side to it, which is, one little part of the message in the book that I wanted to share. And so I think what's most important is, don't believe everything people say about you, for better, worse, or for neutral. And most importantly, know yourself and then identify. Is everybody listening to this is, like if you're listening to this, you know that you are capable of more, and don't let anything or anyone put you in a box, whether it's yourself or whether it's other people. Don't let anybody label you, and don't stay inside that box and push outside of it. And so, I needed to take my own advice years ago, and eventually I did. But it was a blessing. It was a curse, all the things, because I let it be, but I didn't need to be.
Something I learned from a American mental performance coach called Lauren Johnson on the show. She spoke about every trait having a light and a shadow side. So,
okay,
for example, the light side to your discipline would have been the ability to build this behemoth online business. But perhaps the shadow side would be that you used it as an ability to reinforce something that you wanted to work on. For example, I'll avoid these social situations and it reinforces my social anxiousness. That's the dark side to having discipline, because you're using it as a reason to not do something that you perhaps need to do or should want to do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I talk about in the book, I had an exercise streak of 1,000 days, like every single day, regular workout, hour and a half in the gym. Or on the worst case scenario, 10-minute hardcore, high intensity body weight workout, and I talk about this embarrassing story. I used to go to Europe every summer from Toronto, where I lived. And most of the time it would route me through Copenhagen or Frankfurt or something. Toronto is like, those are the major stops. And then I was on to Lithuania, of all places, where I did this entrepreneurship camp. And when you do that, you fly from Toronto at night, overnight, you end up in Copenhagen in the morning, and then you get your connecting flight onto Lithuania. And by the time I get there, then it's the event has started. And when I was on my exercise streak, it was like, where do you get your exercise of the day? Because you actually lost most of the day in travel. And so I worked out in a SAS lounge bathroom, and that was like my lowest point on this streak. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm such an idiot loser for doing this, because the workout was there was no training effect. Now, listen, working out is awesome, provided there's a training effect. If there is no training effect from your workout, you're going through the motions, and it's kind of like mental masturbation. So like, what's the point of it? And, if you're working out 1,000 days in a row, most likely you're not going to end up with optimal results, but you'll probably end up, you're a young guy, so you won't know this yet, but eventually you'll end up with overuse injury. And now that I'm much older, I regret some of those 1,000 workouts. And so it was silliness. And again, it was the dark side of that positive trait, which is another thing that we talk about in the dark side of discipline. Is exercise good? Absolutely, of course. But I was letting the good get in the way of the great, and it was actually the good was becoming detrimental to me. So, those things you have to catch yourself. You have to be very cognizant. You have to do a lot of self-reflection and introspection to identify, is this thing serving you, or are you serving it? Because, I talk some smack about cold plunges and working out twice a day. And do I do those things sometimes? Yeah, sure. But only if they serve me. And I'm not going to let those things be the master over me, because for a long time, I let some of those things, be my master.
Today's podcast is sponsored and supported by Hustle. Hustle is the way to get access to thousands of gyms, pools and saunas across the UK. I first used Hustle in 2014 after I graduated and started my first sales job, and I was traveling all around the country, and I needed to still get my training to fit in. Simply put, I rely on Hustle to keep me fueled and able to get access to the important things to me to keep my work performance at its absolute best. Hustle is of course available on an individual basis like that, but importantly now, employers can now offer it as an employee benefit for their staff. Anyone that listens to a podcast like this one knows that it's so important to keep on top of your exercise, and any way that your employer can make that easier is going to be a huge benefit. If you're an HR professional or a small business leader, then you can visit Hustle in the show notes to get that in place for your staff today. Alternatively, if you're an employee and you want to recommend that your employer introduce it as a benefit, you can hit the link in the show notes too. I know there's a quote that you love by Naval that you have to live the book before you can write the book, or you can't write the book if you haven't lived the book. And
exactly.
You are speaking from experience there that your discipline tipped too far in terms of the level of control it had over your life and your identity and your behaviors, to the extent that the great things that you were looking to pursue were being sacrificed on the altar of the good things, as you said. And I think many people who listen to a podcast like this one will resonate with that, because there's times where you maybe feel like you have to fit in all the latest biohacks to your life, or you have to fit in all the latest trends because that's what social media is doing, or that's what the kind of top tier gurus are doing. And we almost fall down that rabbit hole of trying to mimic them.
Yeah, because, there's a lot of people with a lot of great messages. And if you collect one idea from each of them, whether it's a daily habit or a routine or whatever, the next thing you know, you got a pretty long list, and it can bite you in the butt. And especially for, people of the age watching this, you're probably, have a girlfriend of a couple years, or you may be engaged. There might be a small percentage who are married. And as you go through each one of those phases, when you're a single guy, you can do all those things because there's no other dependence on your time. When you get a steady girlfriend, she's going to help enforce healthy boundaries in most cases. Like, some girlfriends are a little overbearing, let's be honest, and will push you to give up too much. And, you have to have the strength and communication to not let that happen. But she will probably give you good checks and balances where you can go, you know what, I probably don't need to do this plus this and this and this. And then when you get married, then it becomes even more serious, provided you take marriage seriously, which, a lot of people don't. And then when you have kids, they're the ultimate boundaries, because you realize, like, oh my gosh, for the last 30 years, I've been so selfish. Everything was about me. And now you have kids, which are the ultimate unselfishness, and you will then quickly be able to 80-20. And 80-20 is a principle that I live by, meaning that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, and 80% of your problems in your life come from 20% of your issues. So really there's a vital few things that you should do on a daily basis that really matter, really move the needle in your life. And you can cut a lot of fluff from your life. And each one of those phases, relationship wise, helps you do that. And then eventually, if you do the self-reflection, introspection, you have a coach or a mentor who gives you feedback, you can really dial it in where, provided, maybe I'm just making these up, right? I'm not saying these are the keys, but, maybe you need to read 10 pages a day or whatever it is. You need to spend 30 minutes reading. Like if you don't have that, you feel off, and you need to do a workout 4 times per week, real hard, real sweaty. And, you need to get up at this time of day. And as long as you do those 3 things, you're going to be as optimized as possible. Now, you might also get to the point where you can add a couple more things in once in a while because, you have some free time. But I think that's the ultimate thing you need to get to is what are the key things that are right for me.
It's funny, the kid analogy where, oh yes, it's the ultimate time management tool because you have
Sure.
to use the time that you've got far more effectively than previously. There's no dead time whatsoever. And I definitely resonate with that. As you generate more responsibility across all areas of life, whether that's maybe you're managing more people in your day job or your business, or you're taking on more responsibilities for your family members, these are things that whittle down that window where we can spend time on ourselves. As you said there previously, you almost felt like there was a level of selfishness, and I'm a big believer that you can't pour from an empty cup, but let's fill up the cup with the absolute most game-changing activities we can do rather than some of the filler tasks that get into our day because of the hype around them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great little point that you make there, is that you can't pour from the empty cup. Totally agree with that. And, here's a game changer, guys. Neither can your girlfriend, wife, right? So you need to make sure, especially when you have your first kid, that you are doing whatever you can to buy back her time or to take some of the load off her, because you and I have no idea what it's like to give birth to somebody, to then have them breastfeeding with you all the time. So, something very important. But another thing that I was thinking of as you were speaking was that there's a phrase in America that's really popular, that if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Meaning, give it to somebody who's productive and is doing a lot of things, because that's the type of person who will get it done. They'll figure out a way to make the time for it. Whereas if somebody's not very good at completing tasks, even if they don't have much work to do, they're not going to do it. So you don't give it to them. And that's just another idea around the boundaries, because as you level up in every area of life, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in corporate, whatever, whether your responsibility or just a leader in community stuff, whether it's a football club or a community center, the more responsibility you have, the more demands on your time, which means you have to say no to the fluff so that you can focus on what matters.
Yeah, your t-shirt today, Craig, and your email signature is success loves speed. And I really, really resonate strongly with that.
This is about decision making generally. So what we see in most entrepreneurs, from beginner even up to people doing 5, 10, 15 million bucks a year, is that they make decisions too slowly. And there's a great phrase from James Clear. I mean, he is the master of the pithy quote. He has a quote that says, if a decision is reversible, best thing to do is to make it as quick as possible. If a decision is irreversible, best thing to do is to take your time with that. Most decisions fall under the reversible. Like, what email software should I use? Doesn't matter. Just choose one. And if you don't like it in 30 days, move to another one. What color should my XYZ be? Doesn't matter. Move on. It's all of those. What should be the name of my program be? Doesn't matter. Name it something today. And if you want to change it, change it. I think the young person who doesn't have a lot of life experience thinks so many decisions are irreversible, but there's so few decisions that are irreversible that you can just think success loves speed. I just got to make this decision fast and get on with it.
I like mantras like that, and even ones that I have is no decision is still a decision, because you still have it on your mental bandwidth, like it's still stuck there in the back of your head,
Yeah.
but you're processing it. And it's, again, corny phrase, paralysis by analysis is very, very common.
Oh,
And
it's a true phrase. Yeah.
I do. Well, I think I always say this in the podcast. I think a lot of cliches are true because they've been around for such a long period of time. So we're going to keep saying them because they have an element
Sure.
of truth to them as well. Where some people, oh, it's so cliched, and you're like, yes, because it continually shows up and proven to be the case. But
Yeah.
the reason the whole success, like, love speed, I love urgency as a quality. Like many of my podcast guests over the last 4 or 5 years, they are all people that move very, very quickly. Do you want to come on the show? Yes, cool. Can you do this date? Yes. Me and you today, we rescheduled by half an hour. It happened within the blink of an eye because we were able to communicate really quickly and clearly, and we just took action on it. And I find those sorts of traits are the people that I'm drawn towards, and maybe that's a bias, but I do feel that that's a common thread across the many, many successful people that I've hosted on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like just one of my little mantras is, take the first slot available. So whenever somebody says, come on my show, if I judge that the show is worth the time, like yours, then it'll be, what's the first one that I can take? Like, let's get this on. Let's get this, not over with in a bad way,
Let's
but
get it done. Yep.
let's do this. Yeah. Let's complete it and move on, see what it leads to. And it's that success, love, speed approach that you have to take, because you can then expand that to all the way up to Elon, right? And so Elon, his whole thing with SpaceX and what he's been able to do with SpaceX is bring the cost of launching rockets into space down by a factor of 10 or 100. I can't even remember what he's got it down to. It's so cheap to launch a rocket these days compared to what it was when I was your age, because he's doing more iterative testing. He's going through the testing cycle more and more and faster and faster and faster. And the more that you do that, whether you're launching rockets or running Facebook ads or sending emails out to a list or doing podcasts, you just get more feedback faster. If you only do something once a quarter, oh my gosh, like you're going to get 4 tests in a year. And like, what are you actually going to learn? Hardly anything. So you do have to move through things as quickly as possible. Now, that's the light side of it. The dark side of that is that you can only move through so many things as quickly as possible. And this is one of the overarching themes in the book, is that what causes people to have paralysis by analysis or get stuck or be struggling or spinning their wheels or whatever, cliche you want to use, is that they're trying to do this with too many things. They're trying to be on 5 different social medias. They're launching a YouTube channel, but they want to launch a podcast that's different from the YouTube channel. Like, slow down. You can only do a certain number of things at a great speed and done well. So again, you have to step back, figure out what's the right channel, what's the right approach for me, what's the right career path, and you aim in that direction. Now, there'll be some course correction over time, but you got to narrow it down to like, I'm going to bet on this avenue, and I'm going to get really good at it, and I'm going to do it over and over and over again until I get a conclusion from it, and then I'll decide what to do next.
I've worked really hard to wear the different hats that I wear, but make sure that there's congruence between the different skills that I apply across those areas. So at this moment in time, I'm still working as a sales director in my day job, doing really well with that. I'm doing the podcast 5 years in. It's grown a lot. It's now got the whole top 1% in the world tagline, all that nonsense. But
that's not nonsense. Not at all.
Well, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. You know what it's like. There's lots
you consider how many podcasts there are.
There's lots of smoke and mirrors for these things, but mine is genuinely up there in the listen notes rankings, which is nice.
Yeah.
And then
but self-talk is very important, and I understand. I'd be the kind of person who would say the same sort of thing, about my books or whatever, and I probably still do.
Yep.
But I would just say, and I think everybody listening, like, there's self-deprecating humor, which is helpful. And then there's stuff like, dude, what you're doing with your podcast is amazing. And the fact that you have those types of numbers now, let alone what it's going to be like in a bit, it's fine.
Yeah, you're right.
It might not make a difference, but it's a good habit.
The Brits are allowed to, we typically err on the side of being a little bit cynical and a little bit self-depreciating. Now, I'm very confident. I'm very happy with everything that I've done, but yeah. I totally agree. And thanks for calling me out on that. And then the congruent skill around both of those is that I'm become a great communicator. I'm great at sales. I'm doing sales and communication coaching. And longer term, I'm sure that will maybe be a vehicle that I do full time. So while I am wearing a number of different hats, they complement each other, and it means that I can move quickly within those. So I appreciated what you were saying there in terms of let's be narrow and deep and not do so many things that we're trying to be fast across lots of different areas, because that's when we're going to fall off.
Man, if I could go back in time and shake myself, because I would have to shake myself in order to do this, is to get a job in face-to-face, nose-to-nose, toes-to-toe sales. So whether you're doing phone sales or whether you're doing face-to-face sales, I avoided that for a long time. I was very fortunate that the internet, started when I started college and, in the mid 90s, and, probably before most people were even born listening to this. And then I discovered email copywriting, which allowed me to sell whilst hiding behind my computer through, supporting my introverted and socially anxious personality traits. But really, I think that the greatest skill set, so for everybody listening, the greatest skill set, the greatest job that you could give yourself or go out in the industry to start in the world is to learn sales, because sales is the ultimate communication. It's the ultimate, listening, learning how to listen properly and learning how to persuasively communicate, and especially a lot of it's reactive and on your toes. I mean, it's one thing to sit behind a computer and write an email and edit it and so on and so forth, but to sit there and have a conversation with somebody, especially if you're selling something very expensive, and to listen to them and to understand their problem, their deep core problem, why they're really interested in buying, and explain that emotionally and justify it with logic. It's like a magic trick, man. And if you learn that at the age that you are at and you combine it with what you're doing, I mean, I would hardly say that there's anything else that you should add. It's just a really, really wonderful, wonderful approach that you're taking. And I think every young man listening to this, and women, I'm sure you have some female listeners too, is that sales, no matter what you want to do in the rest of your life, whether you want to be a pastor, whether you want to be a book author, whether you want to, start a clothing company, you will benefit massively by spending a couple years in sales.
Yeah, I certainly think so, and it's had a really positive ripple effect on everything that I've done, and the way that I've grown the podcast, my outbound messaging, and the skill set that I had there, all came from my sales background that I built up over 8 years within the insurance industry. Then moved across to the furniture industry, so I was able to secure guests in the first 150 episodes that were well beyond the size of my show at that moment in time, because I had a clear, strong approach to my outbound, and I had a clear follow-up process that meant that people eventually came on by the time you followed up second, third time round, and you had a compelling why that made them make it an easy decision.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I found the most...
Actually, sorry, just before you go on, have you heard of Scott Adams, the Dilbert cartoonist in America?
I recognize the name, yeah.
So he has a lot of great books. It's like, oh man, I can't even remember his books, but you look him up, Scott Adams, and very popular personal development books. And he has a phrase called skill stacking. And what you're doing right now is that you are skill stacking, and you are taking a valuable skill of persuasion and you're combining it with the ability to listen. You're combining it with the ability to then do podcasts, and you're stacking those skills so that you become more valuable. So I just looked up his book. So it's How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big.
Nice.
Is probably one of his most popular. His Reframe Your Brain book is also an excellent book. He has a lot of books, but some of them are not on the personal development side. Some of them are. But How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big is probably his most beneficial, because if you were to meet this guy, you'd look at him and you'd go, this guy looks like a bit of a loser. He's like this bald, skinny guy. And, he really, he jumped around, around at your age, from like being he's a bank teller and stuff like that. And, just, average jobs, but he stumbled his way into the Dilbert cartoon, which in America is a very famous cartoon. He makes a lot of money on syndication of his cartoon and the mugs and the t-shirts and the stuff that goes with it. But he understood the power of skill stacking. So he says, like, I'm not the best artist in the world, but he can draw well enough to make a cartoon, and he can draw really fast. And he's not the funniest person in the world, but he can, get a laugh out of people. And he's not the best salesperson in the world, but he can sell his thing. And it's just like, stack the skills and you'll be very successful. So I think it's a really wonderful phraseology for people to keep in mind, that when you're pursuing something, are you stacking skills that are going to be useful? And, another thing, if I go back in time and tell myself, the younger self, to do certain things, I would have told myself to take up Brazilian jiu-jitsu at age 23 or 4 when it became popular, when the first UFC was. Instead, I just kept on playing team sports. And it was fun, right? Team sports are fun. But there was no value in it because I was long past the age of really highly competitive team sports. And so I wasn't getting any additional skill stacking from it. But if I had gone and done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that is a valuable skill that you can have for the rest of your life, which will serve you in a lot of situations where things might get ugly. Even my friend Bedros on a plane used his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to help, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like
Diffuse a
subdue.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, because some guy drank and took some painkillers and he started acting all crazy. And my friend Bedros had like a little bit of jujitsu knowledge and is a bigger dude, and he was able to help them zip tie his hands so that the guy could just chill out for the rest of the flight. Like you're not going looking for fights with jujitsu, but it's the type of thing that can be helpful. And so I think every young man and every young woman should get into it because there's a lot more to it than just another, what you get out of a team sport. You get the value of the team sport, you get camaraderie, but you also get, this valuable skill set will serve you in life. Plus it's a mental game and it's really fantastic. So I think that, is another change that I would have made. And it's parallel to the business skill set and stacking that you're doing, but I think it's very helpful.
You're seeing a lot of guys talk about jiu-jitsu, particularly high functioning guys. There's a guy in the UK called Jamie Alderton. There's James Smith, who I'm sure you've come across online, that is in the online PT space, and he speaks a lot about the benefits of jiu-jitsu. And it seems like there's been a kind of a wave of, I don't want to say influencers, but people of influence talking about these things.
Of all the things I've ever posted on Instagram, when I took up jiu-jitsu at 46, it's not an old man sport, trust me. And when I mentioned that I was training jiu-jitsu, I had never received such positive feedback, like so many invites from people all around the world. Like, hey, the next time you're in Sydney, let's, come and roll. And it's an incredible community. There's nothing else like it because like, if you say like, yeah, I love playing soccer or football, like there's not that many people who are going to say, hey, when you come to Miami, like, let's, come play on my 5-a-side team. Like people will be like, oh yeah, I like soccer too. But I mean, they're not like that. And there's just this community aspect of it. And it's, obviously you're fighting. So it's got a cool, tough guy stigma to it. But mentally, if, the people who do jujitsu are listening to this are like, yeah, heck yeah. I mean, when you do it, like you're playing chess, but with your body, and it's really neat. And it's definitely like when you do your first move right and you flip somebody or you get out of a position, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. That's so cool. Like finally, because it's really challenging at first because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Unless, there's some people that are natural at it, but that's good. And then, you get your stripe and you get your next belt and then you maybe do a competition, and it's just an incredible community, which is another reason that it spreads, but also because it's generally pretty darn effective. And that's been proven over time and time again with, UFC guys who, if they go to the ground, the guys who are better,
they're going to win in the ring. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So there's, and it's part of the growth of UFC at the same time as the growth in jiu-jitsu. So, there's a lot of tailwinds to it these days, but it really is a fascinating community vibe to it.
I wanted to ask you about one of the things I wrote down was disciplined people put level 10 effort into level 10 problems. Why is that?
So in my book, I talk about how all these things that you can do that people consider discipline these days, from the cold plunge to the working out twice a day to reading a book a week, it's an endless list of things. But I've seen people do those things and end up getting divorced from their wives because they were spending 3 hours a day doing those things and no time with their kids. And so how on earth is that disciplined if you lose the greatest thing in your life because you were chasing these things and ignoring your family? You were being undisciplined. So what I've realized was that in everybody's life, we have a level 10 problem. it could be personal, it could be professional, it could be about your relationship, it's going cold, or you're in a fight right now, or you did something stupid, or you're like in $10,000 worth of credit card debt or whatever. Everybody's got a level 10 problem in their life. And most people don't put a level 10 effort into it. At best they put like a level 2, I got 10,000. This is an American problem, probably more than UK, but I got $10,000 worth of credit card debt. And, next month it's going to be 10,000 because I'm not figuring out ways to pay it down because I'm out there starting a YouTube channel or something. Like everybody's chasing these shiny objects. And the level 10 problem, the reason why people don't put the effort into it is because it's hard. And so if everybody on the internet's bragging about doing hard things, but no one will do the hardest thing of all, which is thinking and figuring out how to solve their big problems in life. So I just came up with the definition in the book that the ultimate definition of discipline is putting a level 10 effort into your level 10 problem, and everything else is just entertainment, or worse, a perverse form of procrastination. Because if you're exercising twice a day in one of these online challenges, or like one that I really dislike is 100 push-ups in 100 days. I think it's the goofiest, stupidest challenge, right? Like, what's the point? There's no benefit to it. And other than like shoulder injuries for most people. And so you're spending all this time doing that and ignoring what really matters. And that's not discipline at all. It's just parlor tricks. And so the people who are successful in life attack their big problems. And that's what really matters. And when you put a level 10 effort into your level 10 problem, you can say no to a lot of things, which are distractions, and you can focus. And now, like, okay, I've solved that problem. What's my next problem? Bring it on, bring it on. And all of a sudden your life, you're like, my level 10 problem in my life is that my marriage is a 9 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10. Like, that's pretty great when your life's biggest problem is that your marriage is not perfect, right? It's so close to perfect, but it's not perfect. And I've gotten rid of all my level 10 problems like binge drinking and all that stuff because I did the hard work to get rid of them. And so that's why we have that definition in the book. And when I say it, I speak to a lot of groups that are, much older than your audience, 45, 50 real estate agents and stuff like that. And, they've collected so much baggage and so many ideas of what it means to be successful. And, they're keeping up with the other people. And so that, on their street and buying fancy new cars and stuff like that, none of that really matters in the long run. And, their marriage is going cold because they're, working too much and doing all these other things. But the marriage is a level 10 problem. And then they hear this definition and they go, oh my gosh. And they, then they get back on track and they have big breakthroughs. And that's what this is all about.
Perverse forms of procrastination is such a bar because it makes you realize that not all procrastination is created equal. In my opinion, For example, watching hours and hours of Netflix or going out every Friday, Saturday night and getting drunk out of your mind is a really obvious form of procrastination.
Sure.
But in the other strand, for example, I went for a sauna and ice bath this morning before I started my working day. Now, if I wasn't on top of all my sales calls, all my outbounding, all my podcast prep for interviews at this one, I've got a recording day in London next week as well, then I would have been procrastinating because the biohacking benefits that I'm getting wouldn't have been enough to serve me to not just get cracking and working right from the very start. And when I was reading that, I was like, oh, wow, I have definitely employed biohacks or done a hard thing in order to not take action on perhaps the most vital revenue generating or dial moving activity that I could have done. And I think that was a really helpful reminder for me that even though people see me online as somebody that's very disciplined, been in great shape for over a decade, build the podcast, build the sales career, but am I always taking action on the most vital things? Absolutely not. And that level 10 problem is like etched into my brain since I read it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a great filter, right? Is, what am I doing? What I'm doing right now, is it serving me or am I serving it? And that's the bottom line. And it's like the reason why I came up with this is because years ago I used to speak at this fitness business seminar. So my friend Bedros ran it for 10 years and I'd come every year and I would talk about sales and marketing, and everybody in the audience, there was 500, 700 personal trainers in the audience. And every year I'd look out into the audience and see, there's Johnny and Jenny sitting out there, same seats as last year. And this year they're 8% body fat, but they got $8 in their bank account because they don't do anything with the sales and marketing stuff that we teach them. And next year they come back and they're 7% body fat, but $7 in their bank account. And so going from 8% body fat to 7% body fat is a level 1 problem in their life. Like, there's no need, but they put all of their time and energy into getting even more ripped. It doesn't bring them any return on their investment. And they're broke because their level 10 problem is applying sales and marketing that they learn at the event, but they put a level 1 effort into it because they're scared to do it. They fear criticism and rejection, and they don't like to do it. And so this mismatch of people putting a level 10 effort into their level 1 problem, which is, sports betting or video games or making sure they watch every episode of some Netflix thing that's out there. It doesn't matter. It's not helpful, but they make sure they put the time and energy into it. And then on the flip side, learning sales skills, learning how to communicate properly, learning how to control their alcohol intake, being fit, doing all these things. Like, those are very important things, but they're hard, so people avoid them. And that's why the majority of people are overweight, are broke, are unhappy, are going through life. It's painful to watch. And it's because there is no discipline in terms of the level 10 effort into the level 10 problem.
If you're new to the podcast, make sure you've hit the subscribe or the follow button on whatever platform you're listening on, so I can keep getting fantastic guests just like this one. One of the terms that I wrote down off the back of that when I was journaling and planning out my lessons from the book, which is a very helpful exercise that I do off the back of any book that I read, because as you were talking about earlier, you can intellectually masturbate by reading a book every single week, but if you don't action, let's say the 5 that you read across the year, if you're a bit more time poor like me, then what was the point? So for me, one of the things I wrote was energy allocation. And that's exactly what you're speaking about there. So finding out the problems that really matter, putting in that level 10 effort and putting in your energy allocation to that. So if I look at my diary, it's very clear that health and fitness is a big priority for me. But me being, as you say, maybe slightly leaner or gaining an inch in my arms or gaining an inch in my quads is not going to improve my results in my sales career. It's not going to improve the results in my sales coaching. It's not going to improve the size of the podcast, because people are already like, oh, you're in good shape. And if I get a little bit leaner, literally nobody notices apart from me.
Yeah, right. And so just for everybody listening, because I think this is a very good point for us to break here and say, I'm not saying don't work out, and I'm not saying don't pursue excellence, but understand that you can only pursue excellence in a certain number of things. One of the quotes I have in the book is, if you want to do great things, you have to do fewer things. If you want to do great things, you have to do fewer things. And you have to step back, figure out exactly what you want in life, where you want to be in the next 3 years, what your specific definition of success is, and then understand that, you might be in a season of wealth building, you might be in a season of health, you might be in a season of family, whatever it is, that's the main focus. And then put a level 10 effort into it. And then now you can then see, okay, so I've got, my weekly diary is full of the activities to put a level 10 effort into growing my podcast. Great. It looks like I have about 4 hours of free time left over. So, I should probably spend about an hour of that reading books or maybe reviewing a course on how to grow my podcast. And then now I have 3 hours left over. Great. So I can train wicked hard for those 3 hours. Maybe it's 4 45-minute sessions or 3 1-hour sessions. And great. Whatever results I get from that are awesome. And they're a side benefit. But really, my level 10 problem right now is the podcast or the sales career, whatever it is. And that's where the energy is going to go. So I'm not saying you can't ever do those things, but you have to make sure that they are prioritized properly.
One of the quotes that is synonymous with you, and you'll laugh how I remembered it's your quote, it's discipline equals freedom.
No, that's a Jocko Willink one.
Oh,
mine is structure equals freedom, which is, it's really funny. Like, Jocko's book and my book came out at the same time in 2015-ish. And, his was extreme ownership, and he said discipline equals freedom. And I had never heard of the guy. And in my book that came out at the same time, I used the phrase structure equals freedom, because I was focusing more on the person's daily routines. And if you have a very structured day, it gives you the freedom to do what you want at night. If you don't have structure in your day, then you're going to end up working late because you never got anything done. And so that's where I was going with it. And then he was going somewhere slightly different, but same with his saying. So I do need to give credit where credit is due, because I don't think I'd ever said that before.
Understood. Well, I was coming out of a podcast studio in Glasgow. I just interviewed Sterling Cooper, who was mentored by you back in the day. And Sterling said to me, "You spoke about discipline equals freedom on the podcast. We're on our way to have a cigar, which isn't always discipline, but was a good way to spend our evening." And he said to me, my former mentor, Craig Ballantyne, he said to me, discipline equals freedom, but maybe he meant structure equals freedom.
Yeah.
And he was like, that has stayed with him because he takes a very disciplined and structured approach to the number of podcasts he goes on. He keeps an Excel spreadsheet of each one he's been on. He produces content off the back of each video he gets given. He's very, very detailed. He maybe got that from you. And
no, I don't think so.
But Sterling's blown up online, as you know, with his content because he took the full video from my show. His clips guys turned it into like 5 clips. My clips guys done like 3 clips. So he's everywhere, and he's pulled it from high quality content because we were in the studio. And he was laughing with me. He was like, "I really live by that motto. You should definitely speak to Craig." And I looked on LinkedIn, and I'd messaged you back in 2021 to come on the show, and then you'd messaged me literally, we're talking like 2 weeks later, to say, "I've got my new book coming out. You should check it out." And I've been like, whoa. These things sometimes are just meant to happen. And it reminded me of all those messages that you had around discipline and structure.
You know, what's funny is I, for years, did not use LinkedIn. Like your message was just perfect timing because I had messages sitting in there from people since nearly 2020. And it just wasn't like part of our growth strategy in our business. And then earlier this year, I decided to go in and look through my inbox and found some contacts and messages and clients and stuff that were sitting in there. So now we spend a little bit more time on it, but yours was just a serendipitous message at the right time.
Talk to me about structure equals freedom then. What does a good structure look like?
Well, the most important thing is that you have your morning routine dialed in. I break down the day into 3 parts: morning, afternoon, and evening, as everybody does, but with a phrase that control what you can. And you have the greatest control in your morning. You have the greatest control about what time you get up, what you do first thing in the morning, whether or not you hit snooze, what you consume, what you do in the first hour of the day. Because, if you get up at a certain time and you don't have to start work until a certain time, you have a chunk of time in there that you can actually do some really powerful stuff. And so we teach people to maximize their mornings. We have a Millionaire Morning Routine program online that we've been selling for about 8 years now, with hundreds of thousands of people that have gone through it. And the control of the morning sets you up for freedom in your life. Because the majority of people have the greatest discipline, willpower, and intention first thing in the morning. There are some people that are actually night owls and more productive at night, but they are few and far between. And with all the temptations that people have these days of alcohol, Netflix, their relationships, other stuff going on at night, it's very hard to be a night owl worker. Most people are just going to get tempted to do something else and they'll never get around to it. So controlling that morning is the key. And when you have structure in your day, you do time blocking and you're not bouncing from one thing to the next and you're batching your tasks, you are increasing your productivity. And then the next phase of it is to cope with what you can't control. And in most people's lives, the afternoon gets a little messy. There's a lot of emails coming in. There's fires in your business. People are bringing you problems.
Much more reactive.
When you have kids, there's doctor's appointments or they're getting sick or whatever. And it's just generally chaos. And you have to have plans prepared to deal with the chaos. And if you do that, you're going to navigate through challenging days as well as you can so that you're not late when it's time to leave and go home for dinner with your girlfriend or, work out with the boys or whatever it is. And you're going to have freedom at night. So you're going to be able to concentrate on what counts in the evening. So control what you can, cope with what you can't control, and concentrate on what counts. And that gives you the structure for a life that's fairly well lived.
And I know that your evenings are really disciplined as well in terms of that getting to bed side of things. And you spoke there about not hitting snooze. So much of what happens in the morning is dictated by how we manage our evening routine as well.
Absolutely. I've been saying this a lot lately, and I haven't figured out how to make good social media content on it. But I've been coaching people in various formats for 25 years now. And the keystone habit that I see, like when someone's on a streak and is doing amazing, they're doing this habit. And when someone's disorganized and they're falling behind, they're all over the place, it's because they're ignoring this habit. And that habit is getting to bed on time. Getting to bed on time is like the keystone habit. You can predict if someone's going to be successful if they get to bed on time. Because if you don't get to bed on time, you hit snooze, you're running late, you drink too much coffee, you eat something crappy, you get stuck in traffic, you show up to work and you start snapping at somebody, then there's office tension, then you get home, you kick the dog, and your girlfriend gets angry. And it's like every negative domino is knocked down because you didn't get to bed on time the night before. So we teach people to have that evening routine and plan and prepare their to-do list for the next morning the day before. If you're doing your to-do list in the morning, it's already too late. So you have to have those things in place. And that way you're going to dominate your morning. And you're going to have days where it's like 10 o'clock and you've gotten more done than you used to all day long. But you still have the full day to crush even more work. And that's when you know that you're in the groove. And I'm sure most of the people on here, follow Alex Hormozy or have read his books or seen his posts. And the guy operates the same way I operate. Get up and go to work, and immediately, because if you plan and prepared properly, you have that to-do list. Your brain subconsciously works on your problems overnight if you tell it what to do. You wake up, there's no distractions. You have the greatest discipline, willpower, and intention. And the next thing you know, you like crush something by 9 o'clock. Like even if you get up at 6 o'clock and you're at work by 6:30, by 9, you can have a full day and more of work done compared to what even an above average person will do.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think Hormozy's definitely swung the pendulum in that regard, because I think there was a lot of 2-3 hour morning routines with all the perfect things in there, whereas he's just one of those guys that's like, get into a dark room, get the laptop open, get to work on the most important thing as soon as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I get up at 3:30 in the morning generally. I always used to get up at 4, but now I have 3 kids under the age of 3, so I need my morning time more than ever. We go to bed super early, like 7:30 last night. Got up at 3:30. I was working by 3:37. Like it's just get up. I go downstairs, put some clothes on downstairs so I don't wake up my wife or the kids. Go to the bathroom and I'm drink some water and I'm working. And because I have that system down and have had that system down for, I've probably been doing that since about 2011, that it's just a machine. And that way the production of a machine in a factory is ginormous.
Is a lot of it's on autopilot as well because you're so well grooved into it. One of the phrases you used right at the start of the pod that I want to ask you about before we wrap up is effortless discipline systems. And you're talking there about how slick that system is on your wake. I'd love for you to just go through the 3-step process that people require to build an effortless discipline system.
Yeah. So listen, this is how I quit binge drinking when I was younger. So effortless discipline systems just allow you to quit the bad habits or add any good habit. And it's very simple. So it starts with elimination, then preparation, and then connection. So when I wanted to stop being a binge drinker, I needed to eliminate alcohol from my house. I needed to eliminate myself from toxic environments. So I couldn't go to the pub. I couldn't go to a sporting event on a Saturday afternoon when everybody was starting to get drunk. I just couldn't be there. I can go there now, but I couldn't be there at that time. I had to eliminate. I had to put a lot of friction in the way of doing the bad habit. And then I had to eliminate the toxic people whose only purpose in life was to drag me down to drinking, right? So elimination, man, I've solved a lot of the problem right there. And so if you are overweight, eliminating bad food, eliminating people that make you eat bad food, and eliminating yourself from environments where bad food is the only option, you're going to be so far ahead. Now, on the flip side, there were friends that I didn't want to give up. They were drinking buddies, but they were also good friends. They were well-meaning. They had a lot of great values, but I was generally only seeing them drinking. So I decided to go into the next phase. So after elimination, it's preparation. So I started doing better planning and preparation to spend time with those good friends in non-drinking environments. So on Saturday morning, we'd go for a hike. We'd go play golf. We'd go work out. And then they went to the drinking environments after. I said, I can't go to that right now. But I was still getting the benefits of the friends. And it's, similar planning and preparation is required for somebody who's struggling to take up exercise. And most of you have probably heard this before that, wake up in the morning, put your exercise clothes beside the bed, get up, put them on, immediately go to your workout, because you're reducing the friction in the way of a good habit. And it comes through planning and preparation. So eliminate the bad habit, put the friction in the way of doing it, make the good habit easier to do, make the path to success smooth, grease the groove, whatever phrase, cliche you want to use. And then finally, the third component of the effortless discipline systems, which allow you to make the right actions automatic, is connection. And connection is another phrase for accountability. So having accountability to somebody you deeply do not want to disappoint, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a friend, a big brother, big sister, someone in your community, your pastor, a university professor, whatever, like you're looking for somebody who you're going to tell them, I'm going to go and do this, and you're not going to fail at it because you don't want to let them down. Alternatively, you get connected with a community of like-minded, positive people. So, you go to a gym with a bunch of guys and they're all like-minded, positive people. And you say, hey, listen, I'm going to come to the gym 4 days per week. I want you guys to hold me accountable to this. And if I don't show up, I owe you 20 quid or whatever, right? Like, so that's great accountability with consequences. And you can have online communities. There's lots of online communities for people building online businesses. There's school groups, all that types of stuff. You need to be in those groups and you need to tell those people what you're going to do. It's not enough just to be in the group. You have to tell those people what you're going to do because that gives you the accountability. Because if you're a person of integrity, which you are, you're going to follow through, because if you don't follow through, you're going to feel like a hypocrite. And that's like, there's like purse snatchers and then hypocrites are underneath those. Like nobody wants to be a hypocrite.
It's a big fall from grace in terms of status. That's right.
Exactly. So when you state something, you follow through on. And when you have that elimination, preparation, and connection all combined, you can toss all the bad habits and you can add the good habits and you can stay true to them and follow through. And it's really life-changing.
I think environment design is such a big thing that James Clear built on. I think you've clearly articulated it there. But that last strand is something that's definitely underrated in terms of that tribe of people that hold you to account and support you into fulfilling those goals.
Absolutely. I mean, the right group of people, and even the right individual. Like for me, Bedros Keuilian was a business partner. He was a coach. He was, he was a client of mine. We spent a lot of time together. He's a very famous guy online these days. And I had a lot of coaches before him, and I did 80% of what they told me to do. But when I hired Bedros as my coach and he told me to do something, I did all of it and more, because I looked up to him as a big brother, and he was a life-changing individual for me, more on the personal side even than the business side, because he just had high expectations of me. And man, that relationship was a game changer. And I think that when you find that, you want to stay plugged into it. You want to stay plugged into that individual. You want to stay plugged into that community. You want to stay plugged in so that there's people out there who have higher expectations, who have great visions for you that maybe you can't see for yourself right now. They believe in you at a higher level. You have to stay connected with those people, and you have to do your best to follow through on what you promise them and what they expect of you, and that will be life-changing.
Completely agree. And that was a really value-packed note for us to wrap up on in terms of somebody being able to action that. If the listeners want to continue the conversation with you, Craig, and continue to get more value, where should they head towards?
Yeah, Instagram at Real Craig Ballantyne is the best place to find me. You can also message me on LinkedIn. I'll check my inbox now. And grab my new book, The Dark Side of Discipline. It's available on Amazon UK as well. Ebook, audiobook, paperback, hard copy, all available. It'd be a game changer for everyone.
Beautiful, Craig. All three of those will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the listener.